Hello everyone, welcome back to the Modelling Novice. Today's episode is episode 9 of my Fir Tree Halt build. So, I'm going to be picking up where I left off last time out. If you'll remember, at the end of episode 8, we'd made a start on the scenic work by getting the roadway down and also a bit of earth scatter in places. Now, I obviously want to get that all tidied up, and then I've got a little bit of emergency surgery to do on this side of the layout. My first job of today's video is to paint some of the scatter that I've glued down to disguise the paper edges of the tarmac sheeting. If you'll remember, some of it had lifted in places and some of the tarmac scatter had unglued itself from the sheet. To disguise the issue, I glued down some sand and ballast to fill in some of those gaps to maintain a better texture. Now that the glue is dry, I'm using a grey mix of thinned out acrylic paint to colour over those materials, which should blend everything in better. Even though it's not perfect, it does plausibly look like a tarmac joint, similar to what you see where sections of real asphalt join up outside. I also use a fine brush to paint the exposed edges on the level crossing. This should give a less obvious edge to the tarmac surface. With that dry, I move on to the road markings. Initially, I tried using a paint pen for this task, and despite the size being ideal, I struggled on the textured surface. So I decided that it would be a much better move to just switch to a brush. I lightly watered down some white acrylic and started the markings. Now, I know these aren't going to be perfect or up to code, but I just want a rough representation of markings. Once I had reached the car park area, I had used a cardboard template of the approximate correct size and painted around the edges. I just used an Oxford die-cast card to act as the marker for the template, and this will keep things consistent as I move down the car park. I make any corrections with a fine bit of black paint and I continue moving along. I am also putting in direction arrows, as due to the limited space, this car park is going to be a one-way system. It's quite a warm day as I'm doing this, so this paint is drying fairly quickly. Speaking of the bus, I'm also going to be installing a bus stop on the far side. Our positioning is not ideal here, but I did not want to start all over again, so I made the best with what I had. I mark my 4 corners out using a die-cast bus to give me the rough dimensions. As I get closer to the end, I am taking care to leave enough space for a bus to be able to turn, and the last spot will indeed get cross-hatching to indicate a disabled bay. As you can see, this is coming together nicely, and with a piece of card I keep the bus stop lines nice and straight. Next up is the bus stop writing and the disabled bay symbol. I've moved myself around here to give myself a good best chance of having a steady hand. I did come back and tidy this up off camera, but for now it's time to make some repairs to the left corners of the layout. The 2 hills on the side of the layout have taken a battering when manoeuvring, and it has damaged the paper mache. In order to rectify this, I'm going to reinforce the sides on the front corner using foam board. This won't be possible on the rear, but both corners will then be covered in a layer of plaster cloth, which will provide a much more sturdy platform and be more durable against pesky knocks. After measuring out the necessary section of foam board, I cut it out to shape. It was pretty cramped here with the layout on the floor in this box room. Wouldn't we all love more space? It would mean bigger layouts for starters. Now I have my piece of foam board, and it is time to cut into the baseboard. One thing I've seen from others who have done major modifications or improvements to existing layouts is that it can be very scary to hack away at your hard work, and that it will often seem worse before it gets better. But the results will surely be worth it in the end. This also isn't a job to rush, so I am taking my time to ensure that I have a neat edge where the baseboard ends and the foam starts. Once I am happy with the positioning, I glue down the foam board in place with PVA and hold it down. I start moving on to the next piece, but it looks like the foam board might need supporting until the glue is fully dry. And when the glue is dry, I can turn my attention to the plaster cloth. I'm just using cheap Hobbycraft's own branded stuff here. It's a lot cheaper than other brands, but it also does have its detractors. Some modelers find that the finish isn't always smooth and that you can see the texture of the cloth once applied. However, to mitigate this, you should rub your wetted fingers over the applied cloth, which smooths out the plaster mix as I'm going to do here. I also seriously underestimated how much I was going to need, but at the same time, the whole job used around 2/3 of a roll. I also did another small repair off camera. There was a tear in the paper mache in the middle of the board, right near the rock face, and I just did a few layers of paper mache to cover and strengthen that area. So, the bits where I was worried about in terms of the repair, the corners, are okay, they're pretty solid. And on the corner over there as well. However, as you can see, the plaster cloth has not stuck down to the surface that was already there. So, fixing it shouldn't be too much of an issue. I've still got some filler left. I think what I'm going to do is try and see if I can use a bit of filler just to plug the gap, smooth everything over. Nothing's ever easy, is it? As used previously, this modelling filler is becoming a bit of a lifeline for me. I'm going to keep some water beside me because 1, this will keep the filler moist and pliable, and 2, it will be a job that does get quite sticky, so I want to mitigate that and clean my fingers every so often. I'm applying the filler by hand to give me as much control as possible. I'm smoothing off the edges to get a good transition between the plaster cloth and the existing paper mache surface. I am also filling in any areas of exposed texture to cover them up, as when it comes to applying the scatter it could spoil the illusion. Once this is dry, I will be sanding off the rough edges, before painting over to match the surrounding ground colour. A couple of days later and I am back with a paintbrush in hand to blend the repairs. I start with a paper mache repair in the middle of the layout. And this is the exact same paint that I had originally used on the base, so there won't be any colour match issues. Then I can go over the corners, which have been sanded down to create that smoother texture. I let the paint go dry before I move on to the next task, and that is to finish the earth scatter. I'm just doing one small section at a time, but the entire edges of the ballast and road surface will be covered, plus around the rocks in the terrain. Again, I'm using the same method of brushing PVA at the base, sprinkling a generous layer of sifted soil over the top, before applying a watered down PVA mix to soak in and seal it in place. You'll notice I have switched from a syringe to a dropper, as I found that the syringe I was using likes to stick and causes high pressure applications, which blasts loose material everywhere. Not ideal. Once the initial layer is down, I can go over any light patches with more scatter and green mix. Well, that's the soil scatter and the repairs done, and I'm actually pretty pleased with the result. Now I've got a couple of patches just to repair here on this side where the road ends. Paper is again lifted up, which is a bit unfortunate, but It's what you get for working with cheap materials. But that means that in regards to the base level, the only thing left to do now is the greenery, grass. And the only other jobs after that is all the detailing. The trees, hedges, fencing, etc. So that means we are really, really getting close to finishing this. Of course, there's one job I've been putting off a bit, and that is the engine shed windows. So, no time to lose. Let's get them finished, shall we? Casting our minds back to the last episode, I glued down my exterior window frames to a clear sheet of acetate ready to be cut out and glued onto the engine shed. I cut out the first window and offered it up just to see what it would look like, gluing it down with the Humbrol clear fixed. However, as it was drying, it just didn't look quite right to me. Reviewing the footage, it doesn't look as bad on camera, but the inner frames being on the inside of the glass look very odd in person. So at that point, I made the decision to change tack. So it was time to undo all that hard work and glue the exterior frames onto the engine shed without the glazing in between. Then I cut the acetate into appropriate sized pieces and stuck them onto the inside of the shed, again using Clearfix to avoid frosting up the windows. With the internal framework, I can't just cut out one large strip for each side like I can for the 3 rear windows, so each side window will have its own piece of acetate. With the windows now in place, it looks quite smart, don't you think? I think that's a good place as any to end this video. So, as you can see, we are really getting close now to the home straight. It's very much almost completed, and thank you for joining me along this journey. So, if you have enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, always helps the algorithm. And if you have been enjoying my stuff, please consider subscribing to my channel and seeing what I release, usually every other week. Of course, if you are a newcomer, I hope I've inspired you to have a go. And if you're an experienced modeller, I hope you've had a good laugh at my expense. Bye for now, thanks for watching.